I'm going to be reading two pieces for you, but first I'm going to show you this beautiful white heron that is sitting there. Do you see it? Yeah. I have two pieces that I wrote, and I want to let you know what it is all about. Let me see. Oh yeah, this is the first piece. I wrote that one yesterday. And the second piece I wrote this morning. Okay. In disembodied language is our usual way of talking, okay? In disembodied language, in which we do not listen to ourselves while we speak, in which we are always busy listening to others or trying to get others to listen to us. In disembodied language, supposedly, we can agree or we can disagree. But the reality is that we have never actually, in disembodied language, agreed. If we would have done that, we would have had embodied language. Embodied language in which we would listen to ourselves instead of to each other. In which we would listen to ourselves instead of trying to get other people to listen to us. Yeah. If we would all listen to ourselves while we speak, we would agree. But we have never agreed. So, the false notion that in our usual way of talking, which is disembodied language, in which we don't listen to ourselves while we speak, the false notion that we can either agree or disagree, it hides the truth that in disembodied language we are always disagreeing with each other. I mean, isn't it obvious? Anyway, we've never agreed in disembodied language, so therefore agreeing to disagree is impossible. Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, you can make a phony statement like, "Oh, we agree to disagree," but it is not even possible to agree to disagree because we have never agreed. So we don't know what it is to agree. Basically, yeah. You may quote me on that. We do not know what it is to agree, basically. All right. Well, we got more. Surely, we pretend, but we cannot agree before we have acknowledged that we disagree. So, yeah. So that's how it is. We can only pretend, yeah, to agree. We cannot agree. Yeah, before we have acknowledged that we disagree. So we must first acknowledge that we disagree. And then finally we can begin to agree. Okay. Presumably it is a great thing that we can disagree, yeah? Because that is what the freedom of speech is all about, right? That we have the freedom to disagree. But now that we have disagreed for 250 years, yeah, we're celebrating the anniversary of the United States. And so, yeah, okay, do we have enough of our disagreements now? Are we able to sort of just smarten up a little bit? But now that we have disagreed with each other for 250 years, perhaps we can finally agree, just for the sake of sanity and reason, that disagreeing only makes sense to the extent that we can still agree. So, can you believe that? So now we're going to another notion that disagreeing with each other only makes sense if there's something that we actually agree on. Yeah, what do you say about that, white heron? So yeah, disagreeing only makes sense to the extent that we can still agree. And all of this would become clear if we would first admit, yeah, that's another prerequisite, a prerequisite for agreeing. All of this would really become clear if we would first admit that inner language does not exist. Yes, there is no language inside our head. I cannot hear an inner voice. There's nothing to listen to. I'm just imagining that there is a voice inside of me, that I'm having a conversation with myself inside my head. It's all fancy. It's called the illusion of inner language, which is created and maintained by the way in which we used to talk, which is without listening to ourselves while we speak. Disembodied language creates the illusion of inner language. And in embodied language, we finally come to understand that both disembodied language and embodied language, of course, are overt. Yeah, they sound very different. Yeah, embodied language, in which a person listens to himself while he or she speaks, sounds great, sounds exciting, sounds energizing, sounds lively. But disembodied language, oh my God, it sucks. It is boring. It is draining. It's upsetting. It's stressful. Yeah, it sounds horrible. But both disembodied language as well as embodied language are overt. There is no inner language. It does not exist. The illusion of inner language is created by our disembodied language. So all language is overt, and that knowledge about the difference between disembodied language would always result in an agreement. Yeah. How about that? If we would finally agree that, of course, there is a difference between listening to ourselves while we speak and not listening to ourselves while we speak. So that is an agreement, right? And then if we would have that agreement that there is a difference between disembodied language in which we do not listen to ourselves while we speak and embodied language in which we listen to ourselves while we speak, there is a difference, yes, and we can agree on that, then we would all prefer to have embodied language. Isn't that something? So we would all agree that we should reject disembodied language. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That is what languageology, the science of our subjectivity, so to speak, the science of the single subject who begins to speak with him or herself while he or she speaks, and then he or she begins to recognize, like, oh my goodness, Maximus Peppercamp, yeah, the former psychology instructor from Chico, he was, and he will always be right, because language is, was, and will always be an overt phenomenon. Yes, and we have to get to it, folks, because otherwise we will never be able to agree on anything. And this is the weird thing, we have to agree on things in order to get things done. It's not, how do you say that, optional. We have to agree. Otherwise the whole world is just a madhouse, which of course it is. But only to the extent that we can't agree on anything. So we are already agreeing on things, of course, but we haven't really applied this to the fact that there is a difference between listening to ourselves while we speak and not listening to ourselves while we speak. Okay. So I just read again. All language is overt, and knowledge about the difference between disembodied language and embodied language would always result in an agreement. We all prefer embodied language, and we all reject disembodied language. And when I say we all, I mean we are all human beings. We have nervous systems, and if we feel threatened, we want to get the hell out of there. We defend, we flee, we fight, we avoid. And so our neurobiology makes us more similar than different. And yes, we all want comfort. We all want to feel safe. We don't want to be threatened. And disembodied language is threatening. Yeah. So disembodied language biologically goes against who we are as human beings. And embodied language biologically is in favor of who we are as human beings, because we can finally feel at ease. We express the sound of our well-being with our embodied language. Yeah. Okay. So we all reject disembodied language. And when I talk or write about languageology, yeah, the science of the single subject who discovers the difference between, yeah, disembodied language and embodied language, his or her own, yeah, because we are not talking about others. No, we're talking about our own. We're talking about how we discover our own ability to have embodied language instead of disembodied language. That is what the science of languageology is all about. So when I talk or write about languageology, I neither care about people agreeing or disagreeing with me. Do you get that now? You should be able to understand that. Because embodied language is about neither. Disembodied language is always about agreeing or disagreeing. Moreover, in disembodied language, we don't agree or disagree. Wait. Moreover, in disembodied language, we don't agree or disagree personally. Oh, that's right. I'm making a point here. So I'm saying here that in disembodied language, we don't agree or disagree personally as an individually. No, we agree or disagree because of some group that we imagine to belong to. Yeah, don't forget that. That disembodied language is a group behavior. So you never actually take accountability for the fact that you personally agree or disagree in disembodied language. Yeah. In embodied language, we are no longer busy with this group behavior, yeah, this dreadful issue of agreeing or disagreeing. Isn't that something? So you hear me now, right? You see me here standing in this beautiful spot, and it is a dark sky. It is about to get really rainy today, but I'm still here enjoying before the rain breaks out and then I have to go to work. But you hear me and you can notice on your own, without anybody agreeing or disagreeing with you, you can decide for yourself whether agreeing or disagreeing with me actually matters. If you didn't figure it out for yourself yet, I'm just going to tell you, it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with me. That is not what embodied language is about. Anyway, okay. Our embodied language continues not because we disagree. Oh, this is another one. So when you have embodied language, if you finally get to it, yeah, our embodied language continues not because we disagree with disembodied language. No, that has nothing to do with it. It is because we... Whoops. When we have embodied language, it is because we can have embodied language. Yeah. So it has nothing to do with disagreeing with disembodied language. No. It is because we can actually have embodied language. So strictly speaking, embodied language is not about agreeing with each other, but about using our language correctly. I've said this many times, but I will say it again. Embodied language is about using our language correctly. And when do we use our language correctly? It is when we can use our language correctly. And when we do use our language correctly. When we can use our language correctly, we will use our language correctly. When the circumstances are such that embodied language can emerge, it will emerge. That is the science of languageology. And so when your disembodied language has been recognized and stopped, embodied language will reliably occur. And if it doesn't, if you do not seem to notice or if it makes no sense to you, you can just bet as hell that you are still having a disembodied language. You haven't even recognized or stopped your disembodied language. So how are you supposed to have embodied language if you haven't stopped your disembodied language? You can't. And that's why you haven't had it. Because you've never done what it takes to have embodied language. I hope before the 4th of July you're going to experiment and do what it takes so that we can have embodied language together after the 4th of July. That's why I'm making these videos. That's why I say these things. Because, yeah, what else should I do? So strictly speaking, embodied language is not about agreeing or disagreeing with each other, but about using your language correctly. So when you take the statement 2 and 2 equals 4, we don't say 2 and 2 equal 4 because we agree. We say 2 and 2 is 4 because it is a correct statement. In other words, the issue of agreeing or disagreeing always deals with the incorrect use of language, which is so pervasive that we are inclined to believe that 2 apples and 2 apples equals 4 apples. Yeah? It's not a belief that 2 apples and 2 apples is 4 apples. It's not a matter of agreeing that, oh, you gave me 2 apples and then you gave me another 2 apples and now I've got 4 apples. It's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. No, these 4 apples are real. Obviously, it is not based on agreement that 2 and 2 is 4, but on the use of our language that makes sense to us. Because 2 and 2 equals 5, it just doesn't make any sense. So, because 2 and 2 equals 4 is always the same, yeah? 2 and 2 is always 4, and 4 and 4 is always 8. Yeah. So it is not sometimes 2 and 2 is 5 or 2 and 2 is 3. No, that doesn't make any sense. So we are really talking about the correct use of language. Yeah. And the correct use of language is, of course, the overt use of language. You're not imagining these words in your head. No, you write them on paper. Here, this is written on paper. Here, do you see it? 2 plus 2 equals 4. You write it on paper. You read it from paper. You read it from the blackboard. And you hear somebody say it. 2 and 2 is 4. And that's how you learn. And that's how you repeat. And that's how you know. Because you have said it. You've read it. You have heard it. And you have written it. So the issue of 2 and 2 equals 4 is about whether we use our language correctly. And of course, this applies to all of science. Yeah? That is the correct explanation of what is going on. Yeah? That's how we have control over natural phenomena, which we have investigated. So a table is not a chair, although we know that the word table is not the table itself. And the sound of the chair, yeah, if I say chair, that word chair, yeah, is not, of course, the same as the chair, yeah. We all know that the word is not the thing, yeah, the bread that I talk about or that you read about. If you talk about that breads are for sale, yeah, they have marked it down. The bread that is on the menu also, yeah, you can have some extra bread basket or something like that. The word bread is not the bread itself. So the description is not the described. But of course, if I order bread, I don't want, potatoes or something, you know. I want bread, yeah. So the word bread is not the same as the bread itself. And yet the word bread, if I order bread, I want bread, yeah. And if you come with potatoes, I say, no, I ordered bread. I said bread. So a table or a chair, yeah, we refer either to it in the correct way or the incorrect way. And it is the same with our individually lived experience, yeah? If I am sad, can I speak about my sadness? If I am nervous, can I speak about my nervousness? If I am confused, can I speak about my confusion? So my individually lived experience is also either correctly or incorrectly expressed, just like 2 and 2 equals 4. When I am confused, I'm not happy. When I am angry, I'm not at ease. So the correct or incorrect description is determined by the oneness of the speaker and the listener. Yeah, with the speaker and the listener. I am my own speaker and I am my own listener. So here you hear a speaker who is his own listener. But I am just one person talking here, and I am listening simultaneously. So my talking and my listening go together. There is no listening without talking. There is no talking without listening. So that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about speaking and listening behavior going on simultaneously at same rate. So stated differently, speaking equals listening. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense if I speak and there's no listening. And listening also equals speaking. Yeah. If what is there to listen to if there is no speaking? There is nothing to listen to. So this listening to your inner voice is just nonsense. Your mind is nonsense. Your inner language fancy is nonsense. There's only overt language. Stated differently, speaking equals listening, and conversely, listening equals speaking. Likewise, writing equals reading, and reading equals writing. Yes. Only in embodied language this is the case because of the absence of aversive stimuli. Do you notice where I am? Yeah, the clouds are a little threatening, and in a little while it's going to rain, but I don't feel threatened. I'm perfectly at ease. This is a wonderful, peaceful spot where I can do this reading. Yeah, so in the absence of aversive stimuli, our speaking and our listening behavior begin to become one. And we have embodied language because there's listening to ourselves while we speak. And yes, our language is used correctly because it is overt and we can notice it. We can notice the difference between our previous disembodied language and our embodied language. So my so-called math anxiety, I used to have that as a kid because I failed dismally back in the days when I was for the first time learning about math, when I was still in the Netherlands. I had a very punitive teacher and I did it all wrong and I couldn't get it right and I was freaking out. I couldn't get anything right. I just basically completely, I was such a fool in math back in the days. And I was, of course, in those days still biting my nails, and I was a nervous kid, and very obstinate and very difficult. But I failed at math dismally, and then I came to the United States. I went back to school, and then all of a sudden there was a tutor, yeah, who sat down with me and who calmed down my nervous system and who said, just calm down, just take it easy, just wait a second and just look at the page here, just see these numbers here, 2 and 2 equals 4. Yeah. Now I say 2 plus x equals 4. Yeah. What is this 2 that is missing, which is now named x? Yeah. And all of a sudden I realized I was no longer afraid of x. I was afraid of x. Max was afraid of x. I had math fear. No, I overcame my math fear. And guess what? Ever since I overcame my fear of math, all throughout college, I had A's for my math. I even considered becoming a math teacher at some point, but I didn't because I was interested in psychology. I had so many problems that I became interested in psychology. But it's all about the correct use of language. Yeah, whether it's math or psychology or science, it's all about actually agreeing with each other. Like, okay, no, it's not about agreeing. That's what I was just saying. You know, in embodied language, it's no longer about agreeing. Yeah. So in science, actually, it's not because we are by consensus deciding that it is so, you know. That's not science, no. No, we have verified that it is so. So it's not about agreeing or disagreeing. Yeah. And so if we have all done what it takes after the 4th of July, yeah, by the 4th of July, I hope that you have done what it takes to speak with yourself, to listen to yourself, to notice the difference between your own disembodied language and your embodied language. If you've done it, we are going to have embodied language together. And that's going to be fantastic. All right, well, it turns out to be a longer reading than I had wanted it to be, or it is already 24 minutes, but I'm going to read the other one too. And I'll try to read it a bit faster because you have already been introduced now in this video to the basic concept that I was explaining to you in this first reading. But here is the second reading, which I just wrote this morning, and it is a bit more straightforward than the other one, or a little briefer, let me put it this way. Okay, now, you know what? I'm just going to sit here for a second. Yeah, that's nice. Just be seated. Yep. It helps because I get overexcited. Here. Everyone knows already and has already known the immense difference between disembodied language and embodied language. Yeah, that's the truth. We know already that there is a difference between disembodied language and embodied language, between not listening to yourself while you speak and listening to yourself while you speak. We already know this. We have already known this. We have already known this for a long time. But we have been endlessly beating around the bush. Disembodied language is in essence merely a bad habit we could have gotten rid of a long time ago. But since we are all expecting the other person to have embodied language first, we ourselves never get to it, and we have completely forgotten about it. Yeah. So we expect each other to have embodied language while we do not even have it ourselves. Yeah. We only talk about our embodied language hypothetically. Of course, we never really talk about the way that I mention it, but we talk about our embodied language hypothetically in terms of, hey, speaker, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Have you heard that statement? That statement confirms that in our usual way of talking, we pay no attention to we pay no attention at all to how we say things, as it presumably is always about what we say. Yeah, when we say, hey, speaker, it is not what you say, it is how you say it. Yeah, supposedly we're referring to how the speaker sounds, right? Moreover, the saying, hey, speaker, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, it shows that we have given up on how we say things, and this so-called reminder has no effect whatsoever. That's why disembodied language goes on everywhere. What you hear me having, embodied language, nobody's having embodied language. Surely it is always stated with a sense of exasperation, hey, speaker, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Because it is impossible to make anyone listen to him or herself while he or she speaks. Yeah, that's the truth of it. It is impossible. And also the guilt trip that we lay on each other when sporadically we say this meaningless, ineffective, but illustrative saying, hey, speaker, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It just isn't working. And it makes us even more forgetful about the fact that our sound matters while we speak than we were before. So we have been forgetful about it, and we are doing everything to become even more forgetful. Yeah, everything distracts us from how we sound while we speak. It's amazing how we keep moving away from that. Of course, we're only going to pay attention to how we sound if we acknowledge the outcome of our own way of talking as something we want to avoid. That is, we're only going to listen to ourselves while we speak if instead of producing our horrible sound, we produce a sound that we like to hear, that we want to listen to. Only then what we say is making any sense. Stated differently, we want to prevent ourselves from having disembodied language, and that is the only way in which we create. Oh yeah, yeah. So if we are going to listen to ourselves, then we want to avoid disembodied language, and that is the only way in which we create the possibility to have embodied language. So embodied language is not anything that, embodied language is not anything that comes about through social pressure. Yeah, when we say, hey speaker, it's not what you say, but how you say it. We are putting social pressure on somebody. Yeah. Embodied language doesn't come about that way. Embodied language doesn't come about by people telling each other to listen to themselves while they speak. It doesn't come about that way. No, it doesn't come about through social pressure, but embodied language, it emerges if individuals perceive their own language as overt, because as long as he or she believes he or she can talk with him or herself inside his or her head, then this illusion of inner language distracts from the actual sound that the person is producing. Yeah. So as long as you still believe in your mind, you're not listening to yourself. You cannot listen to yourself. So it is distracting from the actual sound that you are producing overtly, which is the only way in which you can actually hear yourself and say, oh my gosh, I sound horrible. I don't want to have this disembodied language. So the illusion of inner language, it not only distracts from the overt nature of language, but it also justifies, it defends, and it perpetuates your disembodied language. So it is very, very important to recognize that both disembodied language and embodied language are, of course, overt, and that all the inner stuff that we fantasize that goes together with our disembodied language and our embodied language, because we imagine both. Yeah, even if I tell you about embodied language, you still imagine that you have inner stuff going on with embodied language. But there's no inner stuff going on with embodied language, because all language is overt. You are completely done with all this stuff of your mind and your thinking and your inner self and all that kind of nonsense and all your religion and all your superstition. It's all going to be gone once you have embodied language. Yeah. Because, yeah, once you hear the difference between disembodied language and embodied language, you don't want disembodied language anymore. You just want to go on with your embodied language. And that is after the 4th of July. We will hopefully get to talk with each other. And then we'll have embodied language together. Now, have a great day.